As private healthcare remains unaffordable for many South Africans, government has stepped in. But a coalition of healthcare professionals is urging government to abandon some of its plans. The Department of Trade and Industry earlier publishing those draft new rules that propose exempting healthcare providers from certain competition rules to allow them to collectively negotiate their fees, and the hope is the fees will come down. But the United Healthcare Access Coalition says the collective bargaining scheme is flawed and it won't bring down costs. We're joined by the coalition's Dr. Aslam Dasoo. Doctor, thank you for being with us. What is wrong with the regulations to bring down healthcare costs, which many South Africans would welcome?
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me. Yes, absolutely everyone would welcome that. But this will not do that, unfortunately. These regulations are a piecemeal product of the health market inquiry, which ended in 2019, and severely criticized the government for having left the private healthcare industry unregulated in all material aspects. So just to give you a bit of context here in what they have done, in way back in 2000, thereabouts, when the new competition law came into force, at the time, the medical schemes industry body, the Board of Healthcare Funders, of which I was the CEO, would collectively bargain on the tariff setting with provided groups. So it wouldn't be individual market players, which the competition law requires. And we, of course, went to the Competition Commission and said the new laws mean that we are not compliant, and we are quite happy to give up that role and, for the act to be properly implemented, because we accept that competition law is necessary, even in the health sector. This, for the last 2 decades, has gone back and forth. Well, certainly that's what happened initially, but then the Department of Health, which has this great control freakery, wanted to be involved in managing these tariffs in the private sector. And they continued various iterations of this, didn't work. The health market inquiry then put forward a comprehensive framework for negotiating tariffs, which would require an exemption from the competition law, lawful exemption, to allow for that to happen so that proper pricing in private healthcare could be implemented. This is 2019. They've done nothing about it until then. So now they are putting forward these regulations, and these regulations are part of those recommendations. And those recommendations, unfortunately for them, are a package. You can't pick and choose. You can't cherry pick the regulations you want. And we have a view about this. Technically, they can't work. You can't get an exemption framework without the corresponding legislation being in place. There isn't any. So the Department of Trade and Industry has been kind of dragooned into putting forward these exemption, this block exemption, so that the Department of Health can again conduct the negotiations on prices, and they don't have the ability to do that. So they're completely nonsensical in our view and in our analysis.
To make it simple, are you saying that medical aids used to have that ability to go to the hospitals and doctors and say, bring down your costs as a group? Then it went back and forth, and now the health department wants to play that role. So it won't be, because it says the competition rules will go. So it won't be the health providers themselves deciding what is a cap on any fee if you go to a doctor, for example. It'll be the health department involved. Is that how it works?
Yes, quite right. And just to make one correction, it's not that the medical schemes industry would go to the providers and say, right, what is the lowest fee we can pay here? It would be a negotiation. It would be market orientated. Now, we have an abnormal market in the private health sector. It's facing market failures, and the government has not done anything about it. The market players themselves are saying so. And, in any private enterprise, if there's a regulatory vacuum, private enterprise loves that, and it just grows. So your medical scheme contribution has just grown enormously to meet that oversupply, while the demand has stayed. because there are no more medical aid members than there were back in the day because the economy hasn't grown. There isn't more employment. So what we're saying is that on top of that, to put in these regulations supposedly drawn from the health market inquiry, one or two of them, and then manipulated to insert the Department of Health in the management is what is on offer here. We are quite clear about why this is happening. We know, first of all, these regulations must be completely and comprehensively withdrawn. They make no sense. They can't be fixed through, public engagement and as they are asking for. They must be withdrawn, or they will face court action, which they will lose because of the obvious statutory incompetence here. And then second, they should be withdrawn, and then if they want to engage in this process, they should take the entire package of the health market inquiry recommendations and implement those. That's a different thing. Yeah. But they can't even do that because it goes against their NHI propositions. So they're stuck with the problem. Now, I just want to say what we are quite clear about. The NHI is stuck. To all intents and purposes, it is dead. That's for very simple reasons. It needs tax increases up to 8% of payroll tax. If you look at the budget debacle, imagine how likely that is going to be. It will need 12 pieces of legislation, of acts of parliament to be amended, and a couple of constitutional amendments. It's facing 6 lawsuits, and it can't be implemented because it's not coherent. We know that. But for 17 years, they've pursued that. They've let the public sector go into disrepair. They've allowed the private sector to face market failure. And that's completely unacceptable. But what they are doing, as they have always been doing, is being bloody-minded about this. And because they are mired, they've come out with these regulations to show some proof of life of the NHI. There isn't any. It's gone. It's dead.
So what is wrong in the regulations because of the NHI? What are they doing to try and appease the NHI progress?
Yes. So, no, I don't think they're trying to appease anything. I don't think they have those regulations of the NHI ready. So what they have now done, because the NHI is stuck, and they want to keep it going, they've taken these piecemeal recommendations and they're still targeting the private sector. They're doing nothing about the public sector. And they're putting in this where the department and the ministry will be involved in the tariff setting. And that's only to push the tariffs downwards. And it's a completely insensible approach. We're saying there is a proposal we have put to the president for comprehensive health reform, which was stopped 17 years ago. We've integrated the entire system, universal access to all necessary care for everyone, and using the assets we have in the private sector and rehabilitating the public sector by changing its governance. These are matters that can be done in 3 to 5 years. The NHI, they're talking about a 2-decade implementation plan. Where will the system be by then? So we have a plan. It's very clear. It involves all our health workers. There are 35 organizations backing this, from all the professional groups to patient advocacy groups. And we're saying here, if you do this in 3 to 5 years, you will have a comprehensive health system which will allow universal access to care, which is what we all want. But the NHI can't do it, nor will these regulations.
Can you outline the reforms that you said were put forward, moving the NHI aside, just to bring down private healthcare costs that will work?
Well, in the NHI, we don't see how it will. The provisions in the NHI don't actually do that. The provisions in the NHI...
No, I'm talking about, you said the earlier inquiry came up with some suggestions that would work. Right. So if we want to just bring down private healthcare costs, what can be done that is practical, legal and workable?
So what the health market inquiry did, which everyone accepted, the private sector, government, everybody, well, presumably the government. It was chaired by former Chief Justice Sandile Ngcobo, and he had laid out very clearly through that commission what needs to happen. It's a set of regulations that include a supply-side regulator. Right now, we have a Council for Medical Schemes, which is the demand-side regulator, okay, so the purchaser. The provider side is completely open. So you need a supply side regulator. Under that regulator are a number of agencies that come in, including tariff setting arrangements, which will require some form of exemption from the competition laws, which are allowed and legal, and that will allow a tariff to be set every year through a negotiation between the parties in a multilateral negotiating forum. It's all laid out, and you have to put them all together. You can't pick and choose what you want, because if you do that, they're insensible. They don't work. And so the supply side regulation is important. It also makes sure that things like health technology, pharmaceuticals, all of those things that currently just come in at any given price and that gets billed to your medical aid will now be assessed, made sure that it's appropriate, and proper tariffs get set. So it's a whole range of things that do that. And for medical scheme members and for people using private healthcare, that's important to know, so that they know that what they pay is a fair market price, not something that someone dreams up. Right now, we know that there are specialists who charge up to 5 times an acceptable medical scheme tariff rate. And people have to pay that out of their pockets. So that must end. We are absolutely sure that that must end. But you can't end it unless you put in a supply-side regulator, such as the Health Market Inquiry suggests.
All right, thank you for making something complex understandable, and hopefully something workable prevails to bring down private healthcare costs. That was Dr. Aslam Dasoo from the United Healthcare Access Coalition.